to even understand a bit better and the whole dynamic in our group, I would invite now Magdalena, who will do with us a short exercise so that we can know better our common expectation or maybe different expectation of the group. Magdalena, can you explain us our exercises you will take us with?
I don't know if you know Mentimeter. If you have your mobile phones, then you can, I will share my screen, and you can see if you write in your telephone browser the address www.menti.com and enter the code, then you will get access to a little survey that is happening in real time. This is anonymous, so we don't see who you are, who answers, but this is more for us to actually know a little bit about you and your expectations. Okay, I can see someone likes it. Very good.
It was me. Sorry, I pressed the
Oh, two people even like it. Okay, so and you can also use QR code. So please log in, and then there will be some questions. And the first question, if you didn't manage, you see on every slide you see the website address and the code number in case you lose connection. And the first question is, how do you feel today? Tired, joyful, hardworking? Hardworking people. Hardworking people. Oh, very hardworking. So hopefully it will be also joyful in the end of this day. Yes, one person already enjoys. Very good. But the good thing is nobody is tired. Very good. Very good. And yes, even one more person, that three more people.
Okay,
it's a tough competition between joyful and hardworking people. Let's move to the next question. Which markets is your company already present on? And here you can have multiple answers. Okay, so a little bit of everything. We understand why you are here. Okay. Okay, I will move to the next question. Which markets is your company planning to enter? Okay, it's good. I will talk about Central Eastern Europe, but many of the tips I'm giving are also very useful for other markets. This you can be sure about, and Ute will tell a lot about US. And how do you see your international collaboration? Mostly as opportunity, challenge, struggle, fun? Fantastic, very positive attitudes. It can be probably a little bit of everything depending on the situation, but definitely a lot of opportunities. And the last question, what would you like to learn today? I'm open-minded. How culture influences market entry. Understand better cultural differences. Tips for more efficient collaboration with new countries. Current challenges in global collaboration. Anything else? You can give multiple answers, questions. You will get a lot of it. I think that, this is what this meeting, how to start and expand collaboration with partners overseas. What would be the mutual benefits and challenges to overcome? Yes, these are the topics we will talk about today. And we will start with me saying you a few words about collaboration with Central Eastern Europe. Why this topic? I'm an intercultural trainer and coach, and I'm Polish. Now I live in Berlin. Before I used to live in other countries as well, in Norway, Saudi Arabia. And I used to work for international companies and with people and culture development. And actually, what might be interesting for you if you are related to SIBB and maybe some of you from IT business, I also took part in digital transformation projects. And then what I experienced was actually how much culture matters. We already had this discussion in the breakout room. That for the success of projects, it's very much about collaboration style, communication style, not as much as about solving technical issues. Of course, there are technical issues, but for the success of the projects, if they are struggling, it's very often about working styles. And these experiences contributed to me establishing interculture. And we are a Polish-Swedish company. And we work with organizations, we support them in smooth collaboration across cultures. We work with teams. These are usually multinational distributed teams, global teams, but we also support joint venture projects. This is very often between Scandinavian countries and Central Eastern Europe. Also companies that enter new markets or managers relocating to new countries. So this is very shortly about the company. And what I would like to share with you today are 3 stories from our clients. One is about recruitment, one is about meeting with a client, and one is about team collaboration. And all of them illustrate how important cultural awareness is for your business, and they happen in Central Eastern Europe. But before I say anything, there's one very important remark, something I would very much like to highlight. We collaborate with people, not statistical tendencies. This is important to say. So there are many factors influencing our behavior. So when we talk about national culture, this is just one of the factors. Actually, we usually underestimate the influence of situation. When we are in a hurry, no matter what culture, personality, we are less willing to help another person. This is what research shows. And this is also like, of course, I also don't know how you will behave because you are, I cannot predict the behavior of you because you are Polish or German or American, but culture knowledge can help me understand you and can help you to understand your business partners. There is a lot of cross-cultural research nowadays. Maybe you are familiar with the book of Erin Meyer, The Culture Map. Has anybody of you read it already? No, I can recommend the book. Nice light reading, lots of anecdotes and great examples. And it illustrates very well the variety of work styles in business. So we focus on such areas like how we build trust and relations across cultures, how we give feedback, about decision making, about how we show disagreement, what it means to deliver a convincing presentation, and so on. And as you can see on this example from selected Central European countries, geographical closeness does not mean that we are similar in all areas. I would say that for me personally, I would say this is very important neither to overestimate nor underestimate differences. Sometimes we overestimate differences, and then we look at these people somewhere there as if they were from a different planet. They must be so strange, it's almost impossible to collaborate with them. This is never the truth. But we also should not underestimate differences and think we are the same because we look and behave similar ways. Sometimes there are differences and they can lead to misunderstandings. Like in my first story, it was our client, a Swedish company, who was opening a research and development center in Poland and was doing recruitment processes, looking for researchers. And because these were researchers, so it was important to actually check their scientific skills. But it was also important for the client to hire proactive employees. And then during the interview, one candidate described a situation that there was an emergency situation. The Swedish manager asked him, "What did you do?" And the employee answered, "I waited and called the boss." For the Swedish leader, this was not a sign of proactive behavior, that he didn't try to solve the problem himself, but contacted the boss. But actually, this situation turned out to tell more about the boss than the employee. When you think about Central European countries, many of them are quite hierarchical. And also top-down decision-making is quite common. So it is actually very often expected of employees. Many bosses, like in Poland, they actually like to take decisions and like to be informed about everything that is happening. And this is what is expected behavior. Not knowing about it can be a problem, because you can miss on good candidates, actually, because you might not understand that this is a situation that not necessarily means that the person is not proactive, rather than this is what was expected in the organization. So what I would recommend when you do recruitment abroad: hire local recruitment agencies, but also if your employees are to take part in recruitment, give them culture introduction. I would also say that when you decide to hire a new employee, it is also very helpful to actually explain what your expectations are. Not only regarding the scope of work, but also regarding the ways of working, relations, employee superior, and so on. Okay, now I would like to share with you another story that was told us by Jan, who had a meeting with a client. And this is what he told us. They interrupted me all the time, made angry faces, and expressed disagreement in a hostile manner. They were generally rude. I understood they didn't want to cooperate with my company, but when we were leaving the office, they told me they wanted to sign the contract. Not particularly pleasant experience for him, actually quite confusing. What was the situation actually about? Jan, whom we know, he was raised to remain calm, not show his emotions. And he also was raised not to show disagreement in a meeting unless this is really necessary. But this is not a working style everywhere. Actually, countries differ a lot regarding the level of expression and how okay it is to disagree in official meetings. So, of course, no wonder that, when he met people who were actually reacting. If they disagreed, they were reacting, making faces, you know. For him, this was an unpleasant experience. But what happens if it's the other way around? When people who are more expressive and openly show disagreement, what happens when they meet with people who avoid confrontation and are quite calm?
Magdalena, if I can just, I see
Yes.
this one question, I think just quite straight to the presentation, what was the country from the story? Which country does the Jan come from?
Yes, this was actually Poland as well. Maybe Poland is not as expressive as like Spain on Italy, but also on the expressive side and also more on the confrontational side, yes. But what happens if, you know, people who are more more expressive and confrontational, when they meet people who are not expressive and avoid confrontation? This is also uncomfortable. Then we hear they are not engaged, they don't react, not responsive, or sometimes even worse, they are hiding something, they don't tell us what they think. So actually what it tells us is that we have our preferences. There are things we are used to, and then we feel most comfortable with what we are used to. And no wonder that, you know, for a person from Sweden, this was kind of unpleasant experience, and he understood it as something that was happening wrong, but it was not wrong, especially that he was also interrupted frequently. This was his experience, but actually interruption is also cultural. In some cultures, it is really okay to take over while other person is speaking. It can be a sign of being engaged in the discussion. And usually in those countries, also silence is uncomfortable. When the silence is too long, people start speaking. This is not something comfortable. While in other countries, actually pauses are very important. So before I start speaking, I wait, I make a pause to make sure, because maybe the person still wants to add something. I give them a lot of space. And again, this is a matter of what we are used to, because if I'm used to these long pauses and someone is taking over, this can be very annoying. But I would say that this was an example of a more negative experience, but it also happens. And I would say the following to summarize this story. If your partners do not behave as expected by you, don't get furious, get curious. This is a great opportunity to actually reflect what your preferences are, what is your expectations. And this is also a great opportunity to actually learn something about them. So don't hesitate, ask people questions. We always say that asking questions, this is the cheapest collaboration tool without any software. Actually, we use it a lot when we work with multinational teams. We do a lot of meetings where we encourage this dialogue about working styles. And this is something that is indeed very, very important, because when you talk to team members and when you ask them about expectations, they will very often, on the superficial level, they will tell you very often the same. Trust is important for us. Open dialogue is important. Empowerment is important. Inspirational leadership is important. And they seem to agree. But when you dig deeper and when you ask people, okay, but what do you mean by this? Yes? Can you give examples of behaviors that illustrate for you open dialogue or constructive feedback? then it sometimes turns that they have a very different understanding. So this can be something very, very valuable. And to the end, I want to share one more example of a manager. She was from St. Petersburg, and she moved to Stockholm. And I was giving her introduction to Swedish leadership. And I shared with her some statistics showing that Swedish employees expect inspirational leadership. They expect leaders to be inspirational. And she was very surprised. She has already been in Sweden for a while. And this surprised me. Why is she surprised? So I asked her, okay, why are you surprised? And she told me, when I throw a new idea in Sweden, employees don't try it out. They wait and they discuss, and nothing happens for weeks. So it turned out that it was more about actually time perspective. It was about time perspective, not openness to inspiration. And I give you these examples because this is what very often happens when you dig deeper. It turns out that really this can be very different understanding what it means to be proactive, what it means to be independent, what it means inspirational leadership or efficient work. Because efficient work can be also about how much do you plan in advance, for instance, yes? In Poland, for instance, we actually sometimes do a lot of it. It's quite common to do things spontaneously. I don't know if you, Magda, agree, but you know, sometimes I see it working with clients that in Poland, much shorter time in advance with planning for courses. It's also sometimes, you know, orders, companies that make orders between countries, they complain that this order is for yesterday, very urgent, much less time in advance. And of course, for people from countries that are like long-term planners, this can be challenging. But I would say the following: every trade has its different, you know, perspective. Because the time perspective is shorter, people are also very quick at fixing issues because they are always in the hurry. People are also flexible when plans are changing, and people are also good at improvising. So I would say that for your businesses, it's actually very good to have the diversity of work styles. And with these words, I will hand over to Ute so that you can tell us more about work style in US.
Thank you, Magdalena. So welcome also from my side. My internet line seems a bit unstable, but I hope that it's going to work all the way through. So yes, I'm Ute. I founded Haug Consulting a couple of years ago after working for more than 20 years in international communication and marketing. So having quite some experience with different countries in different industries. So when I started then my own business,
Yes. Oh, just a minute. Maybe I'll put this refreshing. Ute, we lost you. Oh, Ute, can you hear us? I see she's still present. Somehow we don't see. This is also a cultural difference. The internet infrastructure in different countries. I would say. I will try to write to Ute again. Just a minute. Let me check if I can.
Okay.
Oh, you're back. Sorry. Yeah, you were.
Sorry?
Unfortunately, yeah, you were. We said it was a cultural difference in infrastructure, and unfortunately, yeah, you were muted. So, if we heard you till when you said that you were working for businesses with the international communication.
I was working in international communications, and during that time, I actually found out that most issues were communication issues after all. So when I started my own business, I actually wanted to support companies and individuals starting their international businesses to be aware of the issues and pitfalls that may arise. And more recently, I focused my work on working with here in Germany to go to the US, and what do they encounter there. So my entry point for this is actually the topic of communication, but at the end of the day, I support these companies all the way along. I am German, so I do planning and structure, and also getting stuff done, especially the smaller companies who are not really interested to hire one of the big consulting companies. So I'm gonna try and share my screen now. Hopefully that works.
Yeah, maybe you can turn off your camera when sharing screen, then maybe you can hear you well and see the presentation.
By your organization and a person's own ideas.
So can you see everything?
Not yet. Just
Not yet.
Maybe it's loading.
Okay.
We did a test before a webinar. Everything was working pretty well. So it's.
So I'm gonna share first, and then go into the presentation mode.
Yeah. Now I think. Yeah. Now we see. Yeah. Now it's fine. We see a presentation.
So now you should see it, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So as we said, the culture matters. So it's all about doing business in the US. So I'm going to start with some typical situations that you might encounter on a business trip to the US. If I do this kind of presentations or workshops in live, it's going to be it would be a more interactive format. Then I would ask you what situations have you already experienced, but we'll do it like this now. So I'm going to talk about the probably most famous small talk situation. Everybody of us might be aware of this cliche, after all, of the American who does all the small talk, who keeps talking and talking, even in the supermarket. And it might seem a bit superficial. But of course, this whole setup relates also to projects meeting or team meetings, and it's all about the communication. But let's start with the small talk situation, or the need for this, and where actually does it come from? So I'd like to go back in time, back to history. So where does this whole thing come from? Because for us as human beings, it's always easier to be aware of something, to understand something, if we understand where it comes from. So for the US Americans, a couple of years, well, probably rather centuries back, we're talking about a pioneer society. So when the Americans, or the people who landed in America, explored the country, went west, they were pioneers. So freedom was one of their most important values. They took risks to go forward. And so it was very important for them to know who did they do this exploring with. They went into the unknown. So there was just no plan ready for them in some drawer to do the details, but it started all with relationship building and networking in our modern terminology. So they wanted to know who they did this adventure with, so they had to talk. For them, it was just endless opportunity. They took motivation from it, inspiration, and they just went along. In the same years, in the same time, back to Europe, people had wars, there was limited space. So they really were not that keen on freedom as a value, but for them, being torn through wars, they were really striving for order and security. So they had different values. And for them, just this whole talking, relationship building hasn't been that important at the time. So the pioneer society, the Americans, they took risks, they went forward, and there were values and a different mindset that evolved than in Germany. So let's see how does this translate to business today, to the situations today. Americans are really keen on relationship building. For example, the small talk happens also at a barbecue, where you as the German colleague, for example, are invited by your American colleague. It's networking, it's those endless opportunities again. But then don't mistake it for more than it is. This was also a personal experience at the very beginning of my time. You get invited, you think, oh wow, now I'm best friends with my colleague or even my boss. And then you might be slightly disappointed almost the next day when you realize, okay, so now we are back to work and nothing of this friendly, fuzzy feeling is left. Of course, everybody is perfectly nice still, but it's still not really the same as the German approach would be. Because the German approach is when you invite somebody to your home at the end of the day, then it's almost as good as a friend. So there's a difference. And coming back from the historical difference between the pioneer society and the war-torn society, the Germans have taken along from the time a more scientific approach. They are detail-oriented. They have plans and lists. So imagine a project meeting where the German engineer meets his US colleague, cliche-like from sales. So the German engineer, of course, has a planning. He has a list with lots of details and wants everything covered because his aim, his value is perfectionism. He wants to have everything to be perfect. Whereas the American has the bigger picture in mind and just wants to get started, actually. So you can imagine where this might clash at some point. And then it's very important to understand that it's about awareness. It doesn't mean that the one thing is bad and the other is good, or the other, or vice versa. But you have to bring it together. So for the different situations, you have just a different background coming from history. Just be aware, it's all cliche-like, as Magda said before as well. It depends on many other factors, but it helps to understand that small talk for an American is really very important for the relationship building as a basis to start business at all. Whereas a German or European might actually think, oh, not sure what to do with this small talk. It seems rather superficial. Then to the project meetings, the American with a big picture in mind versus the detailed plan of the cliche German engineer. Imperfect action versus perfectionism. Again, it's just a matter of being aware of the whole thing and then go ahead together. For team meetings, be it in a larger team when you meet, but also in the relation between boss and employee, it's also a very different style of communication. Whereas in Germany, direct communication, direct criticism is seen as something positive, as something normal even, because it's supposed to be constructive and you're going to head on from there. This is really a no-go in the US. It's really more about feel-good communications. So if there's something to criticize with your employee, you're going to sugarcoat it. It's the so-called sandwich criticism. You first say something good before you very carefully word it, express your issues with the work of the employee, and then ending the whole thing with something good as well. So it's really all about awareness and understanding each other. This is on the one side, of course, a cultural thing, in that case between the US and Germany, but it's also an individual thing where it helps to be aware for us as individuals in contact, in communication with everybody, with just other human beings. But then back to the US-German differences. At the end of the day, you have a successful combination, for example, in the project meeting with the project, thanks to the German engineer who is keen on facts and the background, you are able to create a perfect product. And thanks to the US person, to the US sales guy in that case, you have you are really fast on the market with your product. So you have the best part of both sides of it. As I said, awareness is key. And at the end of the day, you benefit from the synergies. And so Americans and Germans, who are only example cultures now, example nationalities here, are really perfect to work together. Again, it's just about awareness, everything. Yeah, this has been our quick trip into the German-US culture issues. Anything else? There's so much more. I just had to refrain now from going into every detail, but you can imagine there are lots of more topics on this, and I'm happy to give any more information. Either you can contact me either by email or through LinkedIn. So thank you for this, and I give back to Magda now.
Yeah, thank you Ute, very much. Thank you for both of you. I would like to now encourage all our participants to ask questions. I would encourage also, maybe I will stop now recording, so as mentioned, that we can have a discussion right now.